Welcome back to my sewing room. I'm Kelly and you found me here on Pick and Stitches, and today we're going to be working on Pieceful Basket number 7. I can't believe we are on block number 7 of this pattern already. Let's jump in and I'll show you all the tricks. Okay guys, I decided mostly on this pattern I'm going to mostly follow it. You know I don't like to cut things on the diagonal first, so I am going to have a couple extra blocks. But it's going to be some shortcuts. You can always sew it out the way that they have it written in the pattern, but I wanted to do my geese 4 at a time, and then I also kind of changed up some of the half square triangle method. Let's jump on in and I'll show you what I did. Okay, so we've got all our pieces cut, but first we're going to make our pieces with our R and our O. Then we're going to take our friction erasable pen, and I'm just going to make a line across the middle. I've got my center of my ruler on both points, and you can just use a standard ruler and draw a center line and then go 1/4 of an inch from either side, but I just find this one easier to use. And then we'll take it over to the machine. We're going to sew right sides together. I'm going to throw my stitch length up to about a 2. I've got a regular presser foot on, and I'm just loaded with my typical thread that I've been using, which is that 60 weight polyester. I know a lot of people love cotton thread. I love cotton thread, but this is so much less lint in my bobbin case that I'm kind of loving it. Okay, so that's sewn together. All right, and I'm going to make a couple of these pieces all at once just to save us some steps. So the next thing that we're going to be doing is making our M and O piece. So we're going to do the same thing for this one. And we'll stitch that together. And while I'm over here with the pin out, I'm going to go ahead and make our next one. So for N and Q, it calls to make these shapes and then to cut them. I'm not going to cut them first. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these two together in that same fashion. These are slightly larger, but that'll accommodate that extra seam. I should have got my spinning mat. Never fails. Everything you want is always across the room. Okay, so we'll go sew these two together as well. And I'm just lining up the line on my machine, or the line that I've drawn, with the red line on my seam tape. We'll just chain piece these guys. Okay, so now we're just going to cut all 3 of these apart. I'm not catching that first teeny tiny bit. It's funny, I did that on all 3 of those. So this is already in the seam. It's something I'm going to be cutting off, so I'm not super worried about it being absolutely precise. And I don't know why I was just putting my blade down a little bit late. Okay, so now we are going to be pressing all of these open. However, I'm going to go ahead and just press to one side first and then snip off all my corners That way I only have to snip off 2 from each square. So out of habit, I'm just going to press to the dark to begin with. And I did starch all my fabrics. I am using steam. That is a personal preference. You certainly don't have to. And then I'm just going to snip off all these corners. I need to make that Sew Sampler pop-up basket. I really like having like a little stand-up trash bin that I can move around the table. And I think that's going to be so super cute. But I don't know what fabric I want to use, because it's kind of one of those things that's going to sit out on your sewing table. So I feel like I want to make sure I make it in colors that I really like. But I also kind of want to make it in something that's sewing machine friendly. Okay. So then we'll roll through and just press all of these open. So we have 2 of these blue and tan plaids that are larger than the rest of the blocks on this table. So those are the ones I'm going to be working with next. And the reason I'm doing this, I'm making a couple extra pieces by this method, but I feel like it's more accurate for me. And as it turned out, we're using a lot of these extra pieces that I have left over from previous blocks. So because the green is kind of it's like the towel that holds your bread basket together in all of these, I think that's why we're using those up. All right, so while that sits under the clapper, the next piece that we're going to need is piece M. And we're going to take that and with one of our diagonals, and I'm going to pair those together in the same fasten. But I'm going to have it go the opposite direction. Does that make sense? So when we sew it on, I want to make sure that it's going to fold that way. So I'm going to draw my line from this corner, and then I'm going to place it opposite of our other line. And we'll go do the same thing. So we're going to go right sides together, and I'm going to make sure that my 2 lines are perpendicular. Just felt my seam roll over. I hate it when you go to the trouble to press something open and then you sew it shut. Okay, so now we'll do the same thing with this one. We'll just go ahead and cut it apart between those 2 lines. And then we'll set these seams. I think I'm out of steam, guys. It really helps if you don't unplug your iron, guys. That's why I wasn't getting any steam. Okay. So I'll turn this one up. And now we've got our 2 opposite areas. It's going to go with the blue to the outside. And we'll have the kind of basket liner, if you will. And then one for the right side and one for the left side. And then I'll have this block left over for maybe something else. I have a couple of these floating around. Maybe we'll make something for the back of the quilt. So that's our first little 3 section. And you know what? This time I'm actually going to do it first, like you're supposed to. I always forget. We're going to make these B and I. We're going to make 2 of these. Sorry, I went ahead and cut the rest of the box or the rest of the blocks this time. So I'm always cutting out that same white again. Okay, so now we're going to do our same trick here. Go right sides together. All right, we'll cut it apart. And now we have all of our little half square triangles made and ready to go. We're going to press these one direction, trim them, and then press them open too. Okay, so this is another step that I'm going to do slightly different. For the pieces that appear to be, let's see, it is S and P. I left my blocks larger, and I used this Flying Goose cheat sheet that I love to use from Fat Quarter Shop. I will put a link in the description for you guys. We want to have a finished 2 by 3.5 inch, unfinished rather, Flying Goose. And so I cut my squares 5 and 6.5, but I really like to use this. I pull it out all the time. The first thing I'm going to do is cut these in half, and then I'm going to pin them. And then we're going to sew, I did it again, a 1/4 inch down either side here. So we'll head back over to the machine and do that. And I'm going to be using this Quilt in a Day ruler. You can definitely do this with the Creative Grids ruler as well. I just have those to hand, and those are the ones that I've used the most. I have them both. I've used them both. This is just what I like. Okay, so now we'll take it over here. I'm going to go ahead and swap over to my 1/4 inch foot. My 1/4 inch guided foot. There we go. You certainly don't have to have the guide. This was something I got from Juki Junkies, and I really love it. So I'll throw a link in the description for you guys on that. If you don't have my same machine, I don't know what to tell you to grab, but you can always call them and tell them Kelly said she loves it. What should I get for mine? Okay, so we're going to press towards our larger square. Doesn't matter which color is darker, we're going to press towards the larger one. And then we're going to line these up opposites. So I'm going to have my dark color on one corner and on the other corner. And you're going to have a tendency to want to nest these seams. We can't nest the seams because that won't make us have a true square to sew together. So we're going to line up our corners. Then we're going to draw our lines just like we've been doing. I'm going to throw a pin in it just so it stays kind of still, and then we'll go over to the machine and we'll just stitch down these two sides, and then we'll cut it apart just like we have our other half square triangles. Okay, so now we're going to cut these apart just like we've done on our other half square triangles, and we're going to make one little snip. And normally I would want a longer ruler, but this is already in the seam, so I'm just going to make it work. I'm going to grab some sharp scissors. We're going to make a little snip right here in the middle, not all the way to our thread line. That way, when I start to put these together, they can nest and open up the way we want them to. Okay. Now, when we press these, we're going to press towards the white. So I'm going to have my seam go towards the white on the top half and towards the white on the bottom half, which is why we had to kind of snip that in the middle. So I'm going to press towards the white. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this other side. And I know this is a really funky shape right now, but it's all going to come together, I promise. Okay, we'll do the same thing on this guy. So pressing towards that larger square, whatever that happens to be. So for us, it's the lighter color. All right, and then once we have all of that pressed, we're going to use our ruler to help us trim them up. So on here, I'm going to have the 1.5 by 3 inch finished geese, something. So the first thing I'm going to do is line that up. And trim it off. Now, the next thing we're going to have to do is trim off this little bottom section. So I'm going to line up the bottom of my ruler with that cut I just made. So I know I'm 1/4 of an inch from that point, and I'm going to trim up that last side. And that is it, my friends. Then we have our perfect flying goose. Again, this method does have some discard, and if that's not the way you like to sew, please do it the more traditional way, but this just gives me more precise results. And get that spinning mat back out. Okay, so we'll cut these two apart. I'm going to line up with my center there, and I'm just going to carefully cut these straight apart. Because I know I'm going to trim that a little bit on the other side. Didn't mean to move that yet. Okay. So now we have our 4 flying geese as well. So the first thing we're going to do now that we've got all of our blocks together is we're going to lay them out. So we've got our flying geese. Oops, I dropped one, didn't I? Yep. Okay. So we're going to have 2 geese going up, 2 geese going to the left. Now I'm going to look at my directional pattern here and see if there's any adjustments that I want to make. Like, would this one be better? They're going to go all directions. It's just going to make me crazy. I'm just not going to worry about it. Let's see. Okay. So it's like right and then 90 degrees wrong. Right, 90 degrees wrong. I can live with that. I can live with that. Half square triangle. And then our 2 special ones. We're going to go with the blue to the outside. Blue to the outside. And then we've got this one's going to go with the green down. So we've got green down on all 3. That is okay. So these are going to be our shapes. So the first thing we're going to do is attach our geese to each other and then press them open. All right, so I'm just going to press these towards the other side. Of course. Of course, of course, of course. Okay, now I've let that sit under the clapper. I'm going to grab the other pieces that we're going to need are H and G. Okay. So now we will go over to the machine and we'll attach these 3 pieces, these 3 pieces, and these 2 pieces. I like to start on this far left-hand row, and I'm just going to flip this one over and onto it and sew that together. And I'm going to open that up, grab the next piece, and sew it on. Okay. And then we'll press that all 3 pieces at the same time. So I'm going to grab my left-hand piece again, flip my middle row onto it. So that way. I got a little finger press to hold it open, grab that far right-hand piece, and sew that on. Okay, so we'll set the seams, press it to one side. I always like to try and press it to the side with the most seams. If I'm going to press it open, I want to press it to the one with the most seams first, because I feel like that first press is easier than trying to press them later. Okay, I'm going to press away from my geese on this top row. I'm going to press towards the middle on this second row. And then on this third row, I'm going to press towards my bigger piece again. All right, so now when I flip these all back over, I want to make sure that I've got all my things lined up again. I've got my green kind of showing me that diagonal pattern. And now I'm going to sew these 3 rows together. And then the last thing we're going to do is add on our piece K, which is going to go across the bottom. So that way we can do them all and then press them all. Okay, so I have my first 2 rows. I'm going to take my top row, flip it down, and I'm just going to nest those seams. You can always press these open if that's your preference. Nice. And then we'll flip it open. That's my top row. So I want to come to this other side. And I like to think about the blues have to line up. So now I'm going to nest this seam here at the bottom. And then our piece K will just run all the way across the bottom. Okay, so now we've got our main body of our block put together. We're going to take piece J and align it on this side. And this is going to be a bit of like sew a seam and then press it open, sew a seam and press it open. Okay, so we'll press this open. And then the next couple pieces that we have to make are D and L and those tiny half square triangles. Okay, so I just trimmed up our little half square triangles here. They're supposed to be 1.5 inches. And then what we're going to do is make our 2 outer borders. So we're going to sew those 3 together. And then over here, we're going to have the blue to the bottom, our piece L, and we're going to have piece C. Piece D and C are very similar in size, so you do want to make sure that you're keeping those in the right orientation. So we're going to sew this line together and this line together. Okay, so now we'll press our 2 pieces and then get ready to mount them to the main body of our block. Okay, so we do remember that one of these is longer than the other. So we're going to take our block. We're going to attach our top piece, so that's going to be our shorter piece. We're going to run that across the top. I'm going to make sure this seam is aligned, and then I'm going to bring it back and press it before we attach the next piece. Okay, so now we're going to add K and J around the outside of our blocks. First, we're going to add our little piece E's to them. All right, so first we're going to add our piece E's to both sides. So we'll press these. And then we'll attach them around the outside. So first we're going to attach our left-hand side and then our top. This with the white towards all of this half square triangle business. And we'll add the other side here, and it'll nest on this corner over here. Okay, so we've got all of these ready to go. Now I'm going to set these under the clapper for a minute while we work on the outer part, which is going to be what sets us on point here. Okay, so then we're going to take our piece F, we're going to line it up across one of our corners, and we're going to sew diagonally here. Now this is not one that we're going to be using the other side on. So I'm going to line up from corner to corner and draw my line. And this whole thing is considered discard over here. First, we're going to cut off our excess, then we'll press it open. So that's my extra triangle for a secondary project. So we'll set our seam, we'll press it open, and then we're going to cut that in half. We are almost done, my friends. Okay. So now we have our basket base. We've got our basket that's going to go in the middle. And we're going to attach these 2 half squares up here. So I like to go opposite first. It doesn't matter what side you want to do. We're going to just attach 2 sides. I'm going to center this so that part of the corners are hanging off of each side. Okay. Okay, we'll press these last two seams and I'll trim the dog ears and get it up on a design board for you guys. Okay, guys, that's a wrap on our Peaceful Basket block number 7. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. This was a fun block. It's really been kind of great to do a very similar casing around all of our blocks. And this month I did go ahead and decide to cut out all of my big triangles for the top, all of the bases, although not this part, and then all of my long skinny pieces. So hopefully there'll be less cutting next month. But I hope you've enjoyed sewing this out with me. If you do like any of my tutorials or my unboxing videos, it really does help a ton if you would hit that like and subscribe button. And I'd love to see you guys over. We've got that private Facebook group. That way you can show me what you're working on. So join us there. It's at Pick and Stitches over on Facebook. And until then, I will see you guys next time.